So let's go ahead and turn to, what may happen next. Israel has been very cagey about even whether they even have a day after plan, insisting they're just focused on the current mission of quote unquote targeting or hunting Hamas, which, they seem to have had relatively little success in, much more success plowing down civilians and bulldozing hospital courtyards. Let's put this up on the screen. This was a 5-step plan floated by this guy, Danny Danon. He's a senior Likud Knesset member. He's also the former UN rep from Israel. And here's his Gaza the day after plan for what it's worth, which I think is, worth digging into. Number 1, demilitarize Gaza, ensure the removal of all terror elements, including weapons, ammunition, and rockets, and any other infrastructure connected to terror. During and after the demilitarization period, the IDF will be granted full freedom of action, enabling Israel to respond to all security threats. He says the sole weaponry allowed into Gaza will be handguns for policing activities. So I suppose Israel has the right to defend themselves, but Palestinians, not so much. Establishment of a security buffer zone. This would be a 3-kilometer area. He says the length of no less than 3 kilometers. Entry to the buffer zone will be strictly prohibited to all parties. This is something the U.S. has been against, by the way, because it constitutes a taking of additional Palestinian land, something the U.S. at least claims to oppose. Number 3, Israeli presence at the Rafah crossing. The Rafah crossing on the Gazan side will be rebuilt with new technologies and capabilities, and it will serve as a crossing between the Gaza Strip and Egypt. It will be overseen by Israel and international forces, so no longer will Egypt be solely responsible for patrolling the Rafah crossing. Israel will be involved as well. This one really got a lot of people's attention. Quote unquote, voluntary immigration. Gazans who wish to immigrate voluntarily to countries that are ready to receive them will be given the opportunity to leave in an orderly manner to their destination countries of choice. This very consistent with what Netanyahu has reportedly said, which is his desire to quote unquote thin out the population of the Gaza Strip. So the basic idea here is after we render most of the Gaza Strip completely unlivable, we will allow you to leave your home and, whether or not you return or not, we shall see. Number 5, economic rehabilitation. This one in some ways was the most dystopian to me. An international framework will include countries in the region to promote economic rehabilitation, management of all civilian aspects, special emphasis on the creation of a new educational system. So an international coalition to create a new re-education system in Gaza. Each and every area of Gaza, they say the pace of investments will closely match the pace of eradicating the culture of hate and incitement. So, Saagar, I wonder what you make of this plan and how significant it is.
Well, in terms of its significance, I think really what it highlights is that the Israelis want the best of both worlds. They want total freedom of maneuver and security over Gaza. But then they don't want to govern Gaza, and they don't want to deal with the quote-unquote economic rehabilitation. This drives me insane because, as you can see, they're like the management of all civilian aspects, a new educational system. It's like, okay, you destroyed all of the infrastructure, and then you basically want to kill the people that you want and then leave, and then just say, hey, UN and everybody else, you guys come in and face. It's like, no. You're responsible for that, and you're paying for this shit. Nobody else is going to be paying for it. Especially, so if you have such objections to their educational curriculum, go for it. You want to militarily occupy and compel the population and to try and work against 1,000 years of hatred and all this other stuff. And if you think you're so good as an imperial power, be our guest. There's no way they're going to do that. They don't have the military capability. They don't have the economic capability. That's one thing that we keep highlighting here, but I don't think the audience may understand the ramification. This war cost 100 to 200 million a day because of the reservists. The Israeli economy is really suffering right now. Their prime age working population is either in the IDF or in Gaza. And now they've got to pay all these death and health benefits. I mean, this is serious business that you can't really move away from. And the backbone of the high-tech economy and all of that was built such that the Palestinians could serve and the Arab population as kind of the servant class that would do a lot of the more lowly work. Now what? What are you going to do? You're going to import, a mass amount of population. At the same time, you got these Palestinians here on your border. I think this demonstrates, and I think also in general, the misalignment of the Israelis very rarely, at least more recently, have just been saying the quiet part out loud. They're like, yeah, we'd prefer it if people just left. The US, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, UAE, it's like, that's a non-starter. That's not going to happen. Then the UN is obviously calling for a humanitarian thing, and they're going to try and administer some of this to the best of your ability. But look at Somalia. Look at, I mean, I could go on, Kosovo, all these other places that have been under semi-UN administration. It's failed miserably. So this is the worst of all worlds, I think. And we're going to end up in that situation, some sort of gray zone, period where we'll see, governance is up in the air, and full-blown collapse is probably the most likely scenario for all of us.
Yeah, the thing that I see most consistently reiterated is framing as humanitarian the desire to push Gazans out of the Gaza Strip. And, the U.S. says they're opposed to this. Egypt says they're opposed to this. They say they're very opposed to this. Other countries in the region say they're very opposed to this. But, they've already rendered northern Gaza completely uninhabitable. They're working on doing the same for much of southern Gaza. So then they say, oh, well, you can have a much better life after we've completely destroyed your home and all the infrastructure and all of the hospitals and all of the schools, et cetera, if you just leave. And, there was this bipartisan plan that we saw that's being floated here in Washington, D.C. to use U.S. aid dollars to compel various countries in the region to take in Palestinian refugees. Joe Biden, little noticed, asked for dollars for our country to resettle both Ukrainian and Palestinian refugees here as well. So the groundwork is being laid here, both in terms of, money's being appropriated, but also in terms of the sort of propaganda or information war to try to get people to see this as a humanitarian outcome. So the question remains, though, of course, well, what do Israelis actually want? Mm-hmm. What are their thoughts about the day after in Gaza? And, we've talked to a number of people. I've talked now to, we talked to that pollster. I spoke with another analyst who, had really analyzed sort of Israeli public opinion. Both of them said Jewish Israelis are mostly not thinking about the day after. They're thinking about the here and now. They're thinking about what's going on in Gaza right now today. They're thinking about October 7th. But to the extent that people are thinking about the day after, there's a new poll that just came out. Put this up on the screen. It was written up by the Times of Israel. So more than half of Israelis actually oppose annexing the Gaza Strip and reestablishing settlements that there used to be there, which were uprooted during Israel's 2005 disengagement. This is a poll from Hebrew University published on Sunday. You can see here 33%, so about a third of the population supports annexing the Gaza Strip and reestablishing settlements. 56% oppose annexing Gaza, and 11% are uncertain. I was also looking up, how do people feel about like a two-state solution? And the most recent poll finds majority opposition. 52% of Jewish Israelis oppose a two-state solution and only 35% support. So to me, Saagar, it seems like there's a lot of sense of what people don't want, but less of a consensus around what they do want. And if you dig into these numbers further, they also asked about, some more specifics of what they would like to see in terms of governance of Gaza. 23%, that's the largest number of Israelis support a coalition of moderate Arab states overseeing affairs in Gaza. 22% are in favor of Israeli military rule, so those two solutions are basically tied. 18% would like to see an international force, and a further 18% lean toward that idea of Israel annexing Gaza outright. The least popular option is the one that the U.S. has been pushing, which is the return of the Palestinian Authority.
Yeah, and realistically, only two of these are going to happen. You're either going to have the Israelis who are going to occupy it or the Palestinian Authority. Both of them are very unrealistic. The Arab states will never do this. A, they don't have the military capability, and they don't want to deal with it.
Why would they?
Yeah, I wouldn't do it if I were them. If I was the Jordanian king and I watched how my country basically became Palestine, no way I would deal with that. Then you've got the 11% for return of the PA, which shows you the least popular option is the one that the general international consensus is around. And it's part of why I'm so pessimistic here about the future.
Yeah.
Because, they even said, oh, well, we're ready to turn over after 20 years of these moribund PA forces. They're going to roll into Gaza and administer. Good luck. And who's going to pay them? Who's going to give them weapons? Also, what authorities are they going to have? What are their rules of engagement? It's more more likely they're going to turn into a full-blown military style dictatorship, which I don't know. I mean, is that necessarily beneficial or not? Will they even have the capability to oppress the population if they want to? And then if the Israelis are the ones who are paying them, then they're going to be looked at as stooges by the population. Not a single option for any of this looks good. But I am at least heartened that they don't want to annex it. And I think one of the reasons why is because a lot of them lived through the, the deoccupation or whatever of Gaza. And a lot of them, one of the things that's highlighted is that inside, Israel is a very small country. And I just saw someone putting this out yesterday. Nearly every day, the obituaries of fallen soldiers are in the newspapers and their photos are everywhere. This is going to climb day after. People know what this would take from annexation and military occupation. So I think that the reality of some of this is beginning to set in. So they may be opposed to a two-state solution, but the more that you move away and less support that you have for full-blown annexation, then it becomes pretty obvious what the eventual next step is going to be. Yeah,
and just so people are clear on what that removal of Israeli forces from within Gaza meant, and this is Dr. Norm Finkelstein compares it to, it's like taking the prison wardens from out of the prison and placing them outside of the prison. So there's a lot of mythology around like, oh, we let them do whatever they want. This is complete nonsense. There is complete blockade. Israeli prime ministers talked about, quote unquote, putting the Gaza population on a diet. No control over their airspace, no control over their borders, no control even over the sea. There are a lot of Gazans who made their living as fishermen. That even was severely curtailed. So that has been the reality now for more than a decade in Gaza at this point. And even before this war, that led to horrific conditions for the human beings who live there in terms of a lack of clean water, in terms of a lack of sufficient food, massive unemployment, a majority of the population unemployed. So even before the destruction of the Gaza Strip, things were very difficult for people there on the ground.
Yep, that's right.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.